A few months ago, I was really excited for an emulation device. Very out of character for me. I'm never excited about these things. I barely use them beyond just opening them up, giving them a trial run for a while, and then going back to original hardware. So what emulation handheld had me actually excited? I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and that is the GKD Pixel II. More than a few people have brought up my initial review for the GKD Pixel, and if you haven't seen it already, it is linked up here. And essentially, what really blew me away by the device was that it had a lot of character. It had a lot of jank, but it had a lot to discover and dig through, and I found myself playing games and messing around with stuff that wasn't actually on the emulation end of things. And this is intriguing for a lot of people because the standard for emulation handhelds is you get the thing, you put in custom firmware that you have on all of your other devices, and so it's exactly the same as everything else, except for the fact that it's got a different body. Plus the aluminum housing, the aluminum buttons, the weight of it, the little size of it, everything about it brought me a lot of joy, and it's something that would just sit in my pocket. The video unfortunately went up as the GKD Pixel disappeared from the market. The reason for this is they ran out of the screens. Now, if you are not aware, with these emulation handhelds, the majority of them are, especially the high-end ones, are repurposed phones, and the lower-end ones are also like repurposed phone screens and other obsolete devices. So in a lot of cases, especially when the screen is a sort of non-standard or odd size, this was the same case with the original Miyoo Mini, once you run out, it's gone. So unfortunately, that is when my review came out. I left a lot of people a little bit heartbroken, but not too long after, GKD Pixel II was announced. Now, it wasn't expected to be anything that was necessarily an evolution of the initial GKD Pixel. It was more of rebuilding what that was with components that are accessible at the time. Therefore, we knew it was going to be a bit bigger, and I was actually pretty excited for this because a slightly bigger GKD Pixel is a bit smaller than a Miyoo Mini Plus. I'm not sure how it compares to a Miyoo Mini. I did finally end up selling mine, so I no longer have that in my array of things that I can to scale to, but I thought it would be a very nice kind of middle ground of the screen is a bit larger, but it would still be pocketable, etc. So after many months, I finally received my GKD Pixel II. A big thank you to LitNext for actually sending this to me in the first place. They sent me the GKD Pixel to review as well, and every other emulation handheld on this channel. So they've been a big supporter, and there is a link in the description if you would like to grab something off their site with a little discount and also while supporting the channel. I unboxed it, and the things that charmed me the first time around are all gone. The way this review is going to work is like most of my other emulation device reviews is we're gonna sit down and we're gonna look at it together. But the spoiler alert, in summation, if you don't want to sit around with that, is that anything that was charming about the GKD Pixel, it's not there anymore. It is like every other device out there, which ships with a not great operating system, but this time not holding any charming secrets, and it just expects you to put a new OS on it. Thankfully now it's not just restricted to MIUI, which I personally don't like given that it is incredibly minimalistic, and I think that takes away a lot of joy, a lot of whimsy by turning everything into sort of a list. And you also have Plum OS for the GKD Pixel II, which is more visual. I believe I heard there is a Nully build being put together for it. So like every other emulation handheld, you now have choices for custom firmware. So let's take a look at it, and I will be comparing it with the original GKD Pixel in the flesh, and I will be trying to be fair to the GKD Pixel as it exists in a vacuum as well. All right, so we can start off with a size comparison. This is the Mi Mini Plus, and this is the original Pixel and the Pixel 2. You can see that the Pixel 2 is larger than the Pixel 1. However, both are quite small compared to the Mi Mini Plus. Let's do a quick comparison of these two, because I believe it is a bit more powerful than the original Pixel, but I think it was just more convenient to do since it has come out more recently. So other than that, what are the physical differences? I got both of them in green. The GKD Pixel is a more yellow leaning, warmer green. It's really quite lovely. The new Pixel is a cooler shade of green. One is not better than the other. It is also the nature of anodizing, where you can't necessarily get the same color every single time. And different people are going to prefer a different shade of green, but if you have them in two completely separate locations and contexts, you probably would not have anything to compare to. Flipping it on the back, again, it's like exactly the same. You have the lanyard hole here, you have the lines, you have the pixel. The number of buttons are the same as well. And on the side, you've got the card slot in the same place and the volume button. With the card slot here, you had this indent to put your finger in. And this one, I guess it's just an indent for your nail. I imagine it was easier to machine without this. And there is a slight difference in the style of the buttons as well. The buttons on the new one, the face buttons, are bigger, and the D-pad is also bigger. And then with the start and select button, they've gone from being these long rectangular types to circles. And funnily enough, the volume buttons have gone from being circles to the rounded rectangle. And in terms of the power side, we have the same thing. The button is round, the power button is a slanted rounded rectangle, and you have the color bars here that show different things like the battery level, which is very neat, and both have a headphone jack and USB-C. Oh, and they both have inline shoulder buttons. The text on the new one is a lot more legible and shiny. Not exactly a compliment. I feel like it's a bit odd. I don't know if you can see, but there is a difference in material, it looks like. The original GKD Pixel, one of the cool points about it is that all of the buttons are aluminum, whereas the new one, the buttons are plastic. I am sure that it was cheaper, but they're not even very nice buttons. With the original one, when we press the D-pad, we get a really nice membrane. It's not super stiff, but it's also not super mushy. It has a really nice response, a really nice bounce. The start and select are pretty noisy tactiles, but that's to be expected. And we have the same bounce in the face buttons. The shoulder buttons are also nice and bouncy. And then with the GKD Pixel 2, the D-pad it's fine, but it doesn't have the bounce back that the original one does. It's still, a nice semi-stiff, but when you compare the two, it's not as nice. Also, another thing is if you do like a 360 without moving your thumb, you will notice that the D-pad scrapes against the shell, which I imagine didn't include enough clearance in the shell. A little off-putting if you are sensitive to scratchy noises. And then the face buttons are just really mushy. They're like super mushy. Start and select are still clicky, and same with the volume buttons. Shoulder buttons are also still clicky, but they have less room to travel. You'll see they also took away the start and select on the body and instead put se and st on the buttons themselves. They also changed the logo on the screen. The GKD Pixel is in like a pretty cohesive font, I think, whereas the GKD Pixel II looks a bit like a knockoff of this logo. But again, I think that is rather subjective. I know there exists a screen protector for this one that it has a black border, so it covers up the logo entirely. You will also notice that the area for the buttons is thinner than on the original one, which is interesting. It gives it more real estate for the screen. I think that's neat. I think that's about it in terms of visual and hand feel. So let's turn them on. Something that you might notice off the bat, just from the intro screen, as these are both running the same original firmware, is the saturation on the new display is a lot higher than the older display. I think one thing about the original GKD Pixel is because it is so small, I've never really been troubled by any shortcomings of the screen. Also because that's not really the point of its existence to me, is not to have the most gorgeous screen in the world. I mean, it's tiny, and the glass screen protector does help a lot in terms of what it looks like. Yeah, I never worry about things like integer scaling or, you know, the scan lines or the color fidelity or any of that, because it's so small that it kind of defeats the purpose of any of that. You can see off the bat that the menu looks different. We have like this colorful thing going on here, whereas this is a lot more simple and grid-based. This is actually the main menu, so you can go through the different, you're probably familiar with this type of menu where you have the little cards and you can go through them. Also, it is like very much in Chinese, as well as with like English subtitles, which is a bit different. In this one, when you go to apps, you have your file explorer, you have a media player, a music player, PSP emulation, and RetroArch. And that makes me so sad because you have so much more in the original GKD Pixel. When you go to apps here, you have the music player and you have a media player and file manager, but you also have a simple word editor and an image viewer. And I also group this in with app is the test, where you have like the Flash emulator and stuff. And you also, in this, you have just games, and the games are just independently kind of ported things. Whereas in this one, you don't have that. You just have arcade, handheld, console. And everything is what you see in every single other emulation handheld. It takes the charm away, because otherwise all this is like, it's messy, it's ugly, it's visually overwhelming. And yeah, there's no charm. So I do want to point out something that's kind of hilarious about this is the dedicated volume buttons that you just expect to work. You actually have to go into the settings and like activate them. They don't work upon getting it. We have Sonic Advance for Game Boy Advance. I think the screen size is quite good for this. You're not losing any information. And another kind of interesting thing is, whereas the original GKD Pixel kind of had very limited options for your game controls, like your overlays and things like that. It's like you had like 2 options for a bunch of different things. It was a very custom, quick menu. This one actually has the full RetroArch menu. And I'm not entirely sure how helpful this is. It feels like a bit overwhelming, I think, for such a small screen. In terms of shaders, they're very strange with this screen. I haven't really found anything that I typically use that works well. It's really hard to see because of the rippling, but the pixels are not like one-to-one with the shaders. So you've got like weird gaps in the lines. Maybe in this one you can see it better, but you'll see like, for example, right here, there's a darker blue line, even though this is like a gradient, and it's because two of the lines have kind of merged. It's very uneven. This is kind of also why I'm saying like I don't understand why this even has the full RetroArch menu. It's a lot going on a tiny screen. I much prefer what's going on with the GKD Pixel, where if you watch my video, there's a demo of it, but if we go to PS1, we can load up Crash, and I think that the PS1 games are definitely more readable on this than on this. I think that it's frankly ridiculous to play PS1 on the original Pixel. Yeah, I think PS1 looks pretty decent on this, especially if you have something that is quite legible, like Crash. You know, you have like these bigger character models and everything's quite legible. Again, I think that maybe an RPG or something might be a bit more challenging. And obviously, you know, you don't have joysticks, so the D-pad functions well enough. But yeah, it's fine. Like, I think that this is completely playable. This also runs Sega Saturn and Dreamcast, and with these, it's kind of a bummer that you can't really like do a very nice shader deal. In a way, like I said, it's okay because it is so small, but then again it goes, well, then why? Why include full RetroArch? I haven't mapped the buttons. You may notice it takes quite a while to load up games, as well as to load up the operating system itself. And a lot of that, I think, is remedied in custom firmware. I'm not like entirely sure what to say or to show you guys, because a lot of these handhelds that play like up to PS1 with some N64 and Dreamcast and whatever, it's like they all perform essentially the same. Again, I have not mapped these buttons. They all perform essentially the same, so if you've seen one, you've kind of seen all of them. And I think that this performs like all of them. And oh, you saw just now there was some, oh, you see there's some like stuttering. But yes, it performs like all of them. They all perform very similarly. And my channel has never been one that reviews these down to a technicality. It's more like, is it fun? Is it whimsical? Is it special? And unfortunately, a lot of the time, the answer is no. And the GKD Pixel was something special in the same way that I think the Miyoo Mini Plus is something special. And one of them was special perhaps by accident. Perhaps the makers did what they always do and maybe weren't wise to the fact that, well, everyone's going to use custom firmware anyway, so why bother? And the Miyoo Mini Plus is special by virtue of a community who has made a custom firmware that doesn't operate anywhere else and is just perfect for the Miyoo Mini Plus. So I think that, you know, if this is something that you are drawn to, it performs as you would expect. But what my goal for this review mainly is this is essentially the new version of the GKD Pixel. It wasn't supposed to be an upgrade at its core. It wasn't supposed to be like the next big thing. This one is gonna run PS2 and GameCube or anything, or this one's gonna have joysticks. It was just supposed to change what it had to bring the GKD Pixel back. And for some reason, it lost a lot on the way to doing that. I still think it's very cute. I still think it's very novel. It still does fit in your pocket. It still can go along with you for many a ride. and it still is a bit more of a stress-free device in terms of you don't have to work on getting the screen perfect because it's still a bit too small for it to matter. However, it is just big enough for it to be noticeable, so I don't think it can get away with it quite as much as the GKD Pixel, but it still gets away with it a lot more than other devices. I think it comes down to the same question that you probably ask yourself when buying any of these emulation handhelds of, do I like the look and feel and stuff? Because ultimately, what's inside, the gaps have closed pretty significantly. But I will be keeping the GameKD Pixel, and the GameKD Pixel II will be finding a new home. Also, for any of you weirdos who are interested in this as a music player, there's not a significant change in sound between the two of these. With this one, the GKD Pixel II, there is a bit more noise when you're not playing anything. So in the silence, there's a bit more noise you can pick up on with your headphones. That is not as present in the Pixel, but both of them have a relatively clear and nice sound, and they can handle more sensitive headphones without a huge issue. As I said in my review for the original Pixel, this is not a high-end DAP, but it is a perfectly capable music player. A better DAC than the Steam Deck somehow. The Steam Deck OLED, I will never get over the fact that you can't use high sensitivity headphones with it without getting a ton of noise. It's so irritating, and it is a lot more expensive. All right, what did you think of this little guy? I am fully aware that a lot of people do not care about the things that I found charming in the GKD Pixel, so I know for sure this isn't a deal breaker for a lot of people. However, what about the change in build quality and stuff? Is that something that bothers you? Is it now just too big? Is it a little bit too small? Is it a little too close to everyone's favorite, the Miyoo Mini Plus now, of like, it's too big to be small, but it's too small to be comfortable. Just get a Miyoo Mini Plus. In terms of my final thoughts on this, it's a bit of a final thought on emulation handhelds as a whole. When I first started to become familiar with them, and the Miyoo Mini Plus really did stick with me, it's one that I don't think I'll ever give away, even though I do barely use it. It kind of just sits there as like if I ever wanted to use an emulation device, this would be the one to emulate on. But they lack any character for me. And as someone who is lucky enough to have access to original consoles, I just do that. The ones that I don't have access to are primarily pre-N64, and of the pre-N64, the one that I'm mainly interested in is SNES, and I am able to play that either emulated on my GameCube or on this Raspberry Pi Recall box little thingy that connects to my TV via SCART, and so I'm able to play it while emulated on a CRT. More natural. It's preferable to me than playing it on an emulation device. I am also a little frightened by the culture around emulation devices, and I say this without any intention of offending anyone who may be viewing this, but it is a very heavy consumption based hobby for a lot of people. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. You know, you have people who have like, this is my low-end emulation device, this is my high-end, maybe even like this one's the novelty one. But there are people who will get the same device in every color, or the same chipset in a bunch of different devices. And it's just very alarming. And this is not to say I approve of any of this at all, or to make any sort of political statement, but these tariffs for the USA, in the event that they do occur and stick around, I'm definitely curious on how it would impact people who are so much into this hobby because of the consumption of it. I've seen posts where people are like, not even in the emulation handheld, but on, for example, the AliExpress subreddit, where it's like every day felt like Christmas with AliExpress, and now I can't buy things every week. And it just feels like a bit more of an addiction than a actual purposeful action. Anyway, so yeah, the emulation handheld world is quite something. And I know some people are going to try to pick fights and be like, oh, well, like, people collect original consoles too in every color and like don't play all of them and stuff. Yeah, and that's a little weird too. I'm not saying that overconsumption only exists in emulation handheld sphere. I'm just saying that it is very visible there, and I'm just curious to see how and if that will change, if it'll be a wake-up call or if it'll be something that will be translated to a different product. But yeah, the GKD Pixel II, I think it's a nice size. There's different operating system options available for it. The diminishing build quality in terms of the buttons is a little bit upsetting. I'm not entirely sure what the thought process was there. And but again, that is still comparison, I guess, and an aluminum body with plastic buttons is still a lot more fancy than a plastic body with plastic buttons. And in terms of, you know, what's going on in there, it doesn't matter because custom firmware. But definitely there's a part of me that's like wonders if all of the charm of the first one in terms of the firmware, how intentional was that? Is that something that they intentionally did, that they were like, this is something that we want to put in here because we think it'll make this kind of like an everything device and people can mess around with it, and then people just use custom firmware and therefore they were like, well, we can just forgo everything. And if that was it, or if maybe there wasn't any thought in the first place and it just popped out because the landscape is so uniform that something that unintentionally was a little bit more eccentric contributed to this very charming overall impression. Thank you again so much to LitNext for sending me the GKD Pixel II, and there is a link below if you would like to get a small discount off of your purchase. It doesn't have to be this, it can be any emulation device, but I would definitely be curious to hear if you are still interested in picking one of these up, or if you already have, and what your experience has been. I don't know if I'm gonna review any more emulation devices moving forward, just because I feel like I get weirdly depressed every time. Even if I do think they're cute or intriguing, there's just something that doesn't capture my attention the way that original consoles do. But never say never. A huge thank you to my Ko-fi supporters. Your support means a lot to me, and both emotionally and financially. There is a link in my description if you would like to buy me a coffee, or if you'd like to buy something off of my shop. I've got stickers and downloadable assets and all those good stuff. If you do have a Mew Mini Plus, I do sell templates for the Mew Mini Plus decals. Well, I don't sell them. They're free, but you can tip if you want. Also, I am making a film. It is my first short film. Not that I've been in. I've been quite a few, but it is the first one that I will be writing and directing, and we are currently fundraising on Indiegogo, so the link to that is also in the description. If you'd like to check it out, that would mean a lot to me. If you would like to contribute, it would mean even more, and if you cannot, please do share it nonetheless with any film or art friends that you may have, or enemies. I've been your cool Uncle Marissa, and don't forget that you are always welcome at Cool Uncle's house. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.